What's up guys, you're watching Li-Fi TCG. I got my first attempt at building a deck for Pioneer, and as you can see it's going to be a variant on a green-black strategy. So if you played Standard a few years ago, you will remember the green-black Seasons Pass control deck that John Finkel used to top 8 the Pro Tour. Then later in the same format you had a kind of more like mid-range ramp version of that strategy made by Sam Black, which was less of a hard control deck and more of just like a value mid-range slash ramp, which had more creatures and like a ramp top end and like the Great Aurora even, and Yawgmoth the Seas of Hunger. So Seasons Past is a really fun card. I really enjoyed that strategy. Combining it with the Dark Petition to loop it over and over. Another interesting card that's sort of got released in the intervening years is Demonic Pact, which is a 4-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one. War Leader's Helix, Divination, Mind Rot, or lose the game. And of course you have to pick a different one every time, so if you've already used the 3 good ones, you have to choose to concede, basically. So the way that that card has often been used is with Harmless Offering, which is a red donate, so you can choose the first 3 effects, then give it to your opponent and they have to choose to lose the game. And when that's been Standard, it's been used in a kind of like Grixis Control kind of shell, because you could not only donate it to the opponent with the red effect, but you had a blue bounce spells that you could just pick up the Demonic Pact and then replay it again for value if you needed to do that, or you couldn't draw the Harmless Offering. Because that was the thing, like its Harmless Offering was such a bad card by itself, you didn't want to play many copies, but you had to play some way to reliably find it, or another way to take the Demonic Pact off the table, so you didn't lose the game every time. Because if you had to wait until you had an answer for your own Demonic Pact before you played the Demonic Pact, the deck would just become too inconsistent. You wanted to have it so you could just confidently play it on turn 4 no matter what, and just trust that you had enough chance to draw into a way to remove it. So that's why I had to play. I played the red donate effect and also some like blue bounce spells. So the reason why I mentioned that both of these 2 strategies is because there was a deck in the first few weeks, I think, of the Pioneer leagues, where the player combined aspects of both of those strategies. So it was a Seasons Past Demonic Pact deck, so 3 colors, giant colors, and then it was playing Dark Petition, which not only functioned for the Seasons Past loop, but you could also Dark Petition for the Demonic, not the Demonic Pact, well you could if you wanted to, but the donate spell. So you had quite a reliable engine to find that, and you could also play other cards in giant colors. You don't have bounce obviously because you're not playing blue, but you have cards like Vraska, Golgari Queen, or it even played Korvold, the giant dragon, which lets you sacrifice any permanent. So you can just sacrifice the Demonic Pact if you wanted. And I did a little bit of like tinkering with that list, and the conclusion that I kind of came to was the Demonic Pact itself is quite a strong card. I think it fits kind of a sweet spot in the format where it's just right. Like it's not, in some formats like Modern probably, the card would just be too slow. Like coming down on turn 4 and then only getting those effects for a few turns later, like that would just be a little bit too anemic, even if it is possibly like a +5, +4, +5 in terms of card advantage. So I think that the card itself is a pretty good fit for Modern, but I mean not Modern, Pioneer. But the issue that I had with that Jund kind of list was the Seasons Past engine is just way too clunky. Dark Petition as a 5 mana tutor is like just not really good enough, and Seasons Past itself is really win more, especially when you have the Demonic Pact engine in your deck already to just give you that kind of like over the top card advantage grindy angle. The Seasons Past was just like pretty unnecessary, I felt, and you didn't really take advantage of it too much. So with those considerations in mind, so Demonic Pact probably okay, just as like a value engine, but Seasons Past Dark Petition is a bit too slow and clunky. The question then is, can we have like a Demonic Pact green-black, because that's the other thing about 3 colors is the mana is not great. So some sort of green-black Demonic Pact mid-range list that is consistent enough that it can take advantage of the Demonic Pact. So that's what I've attempted to come up with here, and I'll share that with you right now. So the lands aren't interesting, so I'll go over those at the end. But the spells, so it's mostly just like a pretty stock green-black Delirium shell. So you have the 4 Traverse, 4 Fatal Push, 4 Abrupt Decay, and then 4 Thoughtseize. These are like the kind of spells that you see in pretty much every green-black list in Pioneer right now. Then 4 Tireless Tracker, 4 Grim Flayer, and the 4 Demonic Pact as well. So yeah, I'm not playing any spells like Grizzly Salvage or Sato Wayfinder that help enable Delirium. Jabberwocky / Logan Nettles has been streaming similar lists online, and he finds that you can just get Delirium like incidentally just by playing the game. You have the you have instant and sorcery, plenty of those. You have the creatures which die. If you sacrifice or mill your Demonic Pact, that gives you enchantment. So it's not, and you have Fabled Passage in the mana base, so it's not too difficult to get 4 different types, and then you don't have to play those kind of low power cards like Grizzly Salvage. So all of this works pretty well. There's no Corsair in this list. That could be a mistake. But I'm not so sure what I would cut for it, and the Tireless Tracker has a bit of extra synergy with some other cards in that go with like the Demonic Pact package, being able to have extra ways to take advantage of the clue tokens. So I've been happy with 4 trackers and not really feeling like I need the Corsair, but that could be something to consider. Anyway, so those cards so far. So yeah, so because we're only black-green, and we're not playing Harmless Offering, so as far as I'm aware there's no way in black-green to give your opponent a Demonic Pact. So we need some way to either sacrifice it or destroy it. And of course we have the 4 Traverse, so if these are like creature options that we can search for to do that, that would obviously be ideal. But before that we have 2 Vraska Golgari Queen. Obviously this card can just +2 and then sacrifice Demonic Pact anytime you need it to. And it's also just a totally fine card in its own right. The down tick to decay something is a pretty strong ability, and the plus you can also just sacrifice clue tokens, which is partly why I like the Tireless Tracker, or you can just sacrifice lands, because I'm not playing anything like Seasons Past or Emrakul in the main deck, so you don't really need a ton of mana to operate in an ideal game. So if you just want to plus and sacrifice lands, that's often fine as well. So yeah, 2 Vraska is part of the ways of dealing with the Demonic Pact, and the creature ways that you can of course get with Traverse. The first one is God-Eternal Bontu. So when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of permanents and draw that many cards. So the nice thing about this in particular is that if you have multiple Demonic Pacts in play, you can sacrifice them all at the same time, so you don't have to worry about playing an effect that only sacrifices one and then trying to like scramble to find a way to deal with the other pact. You can just clean them all up with Bontu, and just like Vraska, you can cash in all of your clues immediately, and if you're a bit flooded, you just sacrifice all your lands. Obviously not all of your lands, but the few that you don't need, and then refill on cards. So yeah, Bontu pretty solid, and 5 mana, 5/6 menace is not terrible either, just as a finisher. Then the last Demonic Pact enabler is a little bit weak, or it looks weak. It's the Invasive Species. So it's like a 3 mana Core Skyfisher. When you play it, you return any permanent you control to its owner's hand. So the reason why this effect is nice is that if you do have exactly 1 Demonic Pact, being able to return it to your hand so you can replay it again is a much stronger effect than just sacrificing it. So yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable to play the 1 copy of Invasive Species. It's not the most exciting card by itself, obviously, but there are a few things you can do with it. You can pick up a land to give yourself another Tireless Tracker trigger, or you can pick up some of the other creatures in the deck. So like, if you swift end your opponent's creature, then you play Murderous Rider. You can play Invasive Species and pick up the Murderous Rider and then swift end something else. Or I guess you could rebuy the Ishkanah to make some more spider tokens. So both of those are kind of fringe situations. And you know, this is like similarly, I mean, the Harmless Offering does like way less, obviously, if you don't have Demonic Pact. You could argue that the upside for Harmless Offering is higher because you actually win after you donate the pack to your opponent. But normally, if you get all three of the Demonic Pact effects off and then you bounce Invasive Species and replay the Demonic Pact again, you're pretty much winning that game for sure in most situations anyway. Like, it's pretty hard to lose from there. So I think Invasive Species is totally fine. And then of course the whole idea behind it is the being able to traverse for it. Traverse is just a much better card than Dark Petition, 1 mana versus 5. I mean, even if it's like a pseudo 2 mana with the Spell Mastery effect, Traverse is just a much better card. And then the last 2 cards we're playing in the main deck are 1 Ballista and 1 Scavenging Ooze. So Scavenging Ooze is just like a nice creature to play on curve. The life gain and the graveyard hate both have their uses, and then it's just, and if you need it in any specific matchup, it's, again, you can traverse for it. The Walking Ballista, every single Delirium list played like 1 Walking Ballista, so I just threw it in there just to give you the potential of having an artifact in your graveyard. It's maybe a bit less necessary when Emrakul's not in the main deck, And the other thing that I've seen recently from Logan is that he's playing Hangarback Walker now instead of this. And of course he doesn't even have the like Bontu and stuff to potentially sacrifice a bunch of Hangarback Thopters. So with the 2 Vraskas and the Bontu and everything, I think that Hangarback could be probably a stronger option than this. So I would probably try making that swap going forward. So yeah, that's the main deck. I guess I didn't really talk about Ishkanah, but it's just like a value thing to get with the Traverse that can stabilize the board against attackers, or be kind of like a resilient threat just on its own. Pretty strong option to have available. But yeah, that's the main deck. I'll just quickly go through the mana base as well. So 4 fast lands and 4 shock lands are pretty much stock. 3 Fabled Passage. You could play 4. It does help you get Delirium online and make Tireless Tracker clues, but you don't want to have too many lands that come into play tapped in the early game. So 3 or 4, both possible. Then Urborg and 4 swamps, and then 5 forests, so like 5 of each monocolor land basically. Then 1 Castle Lockthwain, just as a good grindy option. Pretty low drawback to include it, and you can even traverse for it if you need to. 1 Castle Garenbrig. Not really any use for this in the main deck, but it does help you cast your Emrakul from the sideboard. And then 1 Llanowar Wastes, just to help with the colour fixing a bit. I could even consider maybe trimming 1 or 2 more basics for either more Llanowar Wastes or Woodland Cemetery, just to help with the coloured requirements a little bit, because I have noticed that is a little bit tricky sometimes, having to get double black for stuff, or the playing the Grim Flayer consistently, things like that. So something to consider. Yeah, so that's the main deck. I'll show you the sideboard, but it's really like experimental / preliminary. 1 Reclamation Sage. I'm not really sure what this is for, but it seems like a nice utility option to have. At worst, you can just blow up your own pack with it if you have to. Massacre Girl. It's like a Wrath of God that you can traverse for, so that seems pretty good. Against, say, like the Spirits decks, definitely seems like a solid option, especially when they have, it gets around Selfless Spirit because it's -1/-1. You could also play Languish in this sideboard as well, which could be a good option versus Soulflayer, because 4/4 hexproof indestructible Languish is one of the only things that kills it. But I do have Infinite Obliteration, so this seems like a pretty solid option. This also deals with Soulflayer as long as you extract them all before they can cast it, versus the Niv Mizzet decks. Taking that card away from them reduces a lot of their grindy power. If the Heliod combo is a thing, you can either exile all of their Heliods or all of their Ballistas, and then they can't combo you. Arclight Phoenix seems like it could be a reasonable option versus that as well. And then if the Underworld Breach decks continue to be played, and they're only using Thassa's Oracle as a win con, you can wreck their strategy that way as well. So it's possible that they would board into like Jace, the War of the Spark Jace with the Lab Maniac ability. But the reason why they might not do that is because the Niv Mizzet decks are playing Unmoored Ego as their extraction effective choice, and that can hit any card, not just creatures. So you just extract Underworld Breach from those decks, and then they can't win anyway, whether they have Jace or Oracle. So if that's what the Breach players are afraid of, then it doesn't make sense for them to play a backup win con apart from Oracle. So if that's what happens, then this card could be good against that. So it seems like a pretty solid choice for the format, the way it looks at the moment. Then we have the one Emrakul, just to go over the top of any mid-range or control stuff. 2 Duress and 3 Davriel. So kind of like anti-control cards, and the Davriel could be maybe a bit like anti mid-range as well, just like card advantage slash a threat. I got that idea for the Davriel from Aspiring Spike. I think it seems pretty good, so we'll keep trying that. Plague Crafter, just like a tutorable edict. Again, it's a bit like the Reclamation Sage, like I wasn't really sure what to put, so seemed fine. And then 1 Liliana, maybe not needed, depends how the format shakes out and whether it can kill much stuff with the +1. Then Blight Beetle, so this was an idea I got from VTC LA. Not only is it potentially good against the green aggro lists, and the +1/+1 counter nullifying ability stops not only like Hardened Scales, which isn't really seemed to be a deck at the moment, but it also stops the Heliod Ballista combo, because when you have this out, the Ballistas can never resolve. Of course, if they play a Ballista first, then this isn't very good, because they can just remove a counter to ping this and kill it. So that's not so great. So it's still deciding whether that's worth playing, but it's definitely an interesting option to have available. And then I just had like 2 Gontis, just as a random anti-mid-range card. You know, just like trades with the Siege Rhino and gives you a free spell from their library. Not really much to say about it. So yeah, this sideboard is definitely just like a random pile. I wouldn't try and take away too much instructive content from those 15 cards, but if there's any ideas you got out of that, then that's good, I guess. But yeah, anyway, I think the overall main deck plan is pretty solid. Just because the Demonic Pact seems to line up pretty well versus the format. There's a lot of stuff like Questing Beast or Glorybringer or Kalitas, for example, that the War Leader's Helix means you're not just completely owning yourself in tempo by playing this card on turn 4. Because that's one of the things that's been suggested to me, is there's the new card from Theros set that unfortunately I can't remember what it's called, but it's a 3 mana black enchantment. When it enters play, you draw 3, and then when you play a spell, you lose 1 life, and when you target it, it self-destructs. So you could play a card like that instead of this. Like superficially they're very similar, they're just like enchantments with a drawback that come down and give you card advantage, but just drawing 3 is not the angle you want against a lot of different decks that are out there. So like having the War Leader's Helix is really good to help you stabilize versus anything aggressive, and then having the Mind Rot option versus like Ramp, for example, where just drawing 3 cards might not necessarily help you that much if your opponent's just going to go like land, Ramp Spell, Ulamog, and then end up winning the game anyway. But if you can like Mind Rot their last land and their Ulamog away or something like that, then that can be a way that you can win. So yeah, I do think the whole pact plan seems to be working pretty well, or rather it seems like a good idea, and hopefully I can get some more success with it once I figure out the metagame and get a better sideboard. So definitely don't take away that this is like a proven deck that wins games, because it definitely hasn't done that yet. But I haven't had much opportunity to try it either, so if you thought this was a cool idea and it inspired you, let me know. If you thought of any better cards for the sideboard or something, then yeah, I'd be glad to hear about it. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video, or maybe gave you some new ideas for the format. But I am going to be going to the Nagoya GP / Pro Tour. I'm not qualified for the Pro Tour, but I'm thinking about playing the GP. If I am playing, I probably will be using some version of this deck, but realistically I don't think I'll be confident enough in the format. Just like it makes me a bit tilted / upset when I like playing games and I realize that like I sideboarded wrong, or like I learned something during the match that I feel like I could have learned first if I had just played more. And of course, in a lot of ways that's unavoidable, right? Because Magic is a complex game and there's always strange things that can happen even to like very experienced players. But for example, in Legacy, I don't feel like that really comes up much. And even in Modern to some extent, even though I've been out of the loop of that format for quite a while, just because I have so much more experience with it, and I feel much more confident in like my decision making. Whereas with Pioneer, I still feel like really new to it, and I don't really want to commit to such a big event. So whether I play the Pioneer main event or just spend the whole weekend playing Legacy side events, I still have to decide that. So if you think this will train wreck the GP and I should stay away, then that's a comment that would be helpful as well, possibly. But I'm going to upload a video of my Legacy deck, which probably would seem even more crazy than this list, to be honest, but I'm really excited about that, and I'm a lot more confident with it. So if you're interested in any Legacy, then definitely check that video out as well. But in terms of Pioneer, that's going to be all for today. This is Life TCG signing up.